generations to come.
And welcome to another edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News. I also co-host the Down the Stretch show on Sirius XM Radio with Dave Johnson. I want to remind you that this week and every week, TDN Writers Room broadcast is brought to you by our good friends at Keeneland.
My name is Randy Moss. I work for NBC Sports.
I think I might have had my mouth wide open right when we started because, Bill doesn't wait for anyone. So I'm Zoe Cadman with my mouth still wide open. Back home in Southern California, Doodle's jet lagged right behind me if you can see him there. And we are ready to roll. It's good to be home. Saratoga was great, but I am so glad to be home, at least for a couple of days.
Well, even though the meet is over, the subject will be Saratoga. Zoe was there for the whole time. Randy and I were watching courtesy of simulcasting and ADWs. And it was a meet where a lot of news was made, a lot of it bad news, some of it good news. But I wanted to take a chance now to just sort of look back at Saratoga. And, we know everything that went wrong. Unfortunately, it was a lot. We had the 12 fatalities that were big news, including 8 during racing, 4 during morning training, and the 2 big ones with New York Thunder and Maple Leaf Mel in the grade 1s. The weather was atrocious. The handle was way down. It was down about 9%. The numbers are still good. It was the Saratoga handles $800 million, or they missed it by just a hair, $799,000. But guys, all things considered, and we're going to, in another segment, we're going to talk about some of the highlights of the meet, the good races and everything. I just think you can't put you can't put a good spin on this meet. Too many things went wrong. The weather was terrible. And it just seemed to me like this was a Saratoga meet where after so much momentum was built up year after year after year after year, it was the first kind of meet, and I put it in the Thoroughbred Daily News headline, where they lost their mojo. And the 9% down in handle, that has an awful lot to do with the races coming off the turf, but I don't think that's all there was to it. I think even if they had good weather, and I have no numbers to prove this, but it's just my inclination that it was more than the bad weather that cost them the handle. So throwing a lot out there for you guys. Randy Moss, your take now that Saratoga 2023 is in the history books.
Well, obviously, Saratoga is always going to be under the microscope. It's the royal ascot of America. It's the crown jewel of American racing seasons. It continues to be the best racing that America has to offer from start to finish. It's unfortunate that we had, especially the 2 horrific breakdowns that we saw with Maple Leaf Mel and with New York Thunder, that sort of cast a pall on the meeting. It is, by Saratoga standards, and I want to emphasize that, more of a forgettable Saratoga when you look at the recent trends and the stuff that's been going on there. But I do think that the betting decline can almost all be attributed to the weather. 65 races taken off the turf compared to 16 a year ago. Attendance was up a tick. It was a record attendance, yet on track handle was down by 6% and off track handle was down by 11%. That just tells me that the wagering product was not seen by the big bettors as being up to Saratoga standards. And really the only reason for that you can come up with is that so many races were taken off the turf with the scratches, that always brings to bear. It's unfortunate the other things that happened at Saratoga, but I think with better weather and hopefully more safety protocols, et cetera, for 2024, I think Saratoga can get right back on track.
So hold on one sec, because I want to add something a little bit to that. And again, like I said, I don't have all the numbers. I'm not smart enough to be able to put it together. But there are some things that stood out to me why I'm saying that I don't think it was necessarily all the weather. Travers Day handle was off $5 million. No weather factors there from year to year. Jockey Club Gold Cup handle day was off $5 million. No weather factors there. That's $10 million right there of the amount that they lost. Now, the handle went down 79 million. Just came up with, on 2 days, 10 million of it on days where weather wasn't a factor. And Randy, when track executives look at the pertinent numbers, one thing they always look at is the average amount bet per wagering interest, because that takes all the other noise out of there, the off the turf, et cetera. And that was down 6.2%. So, again, I'm not going to say a horrible meet. The Saratoga's finished. Nobody's betting. Of course, I'm not saying that. I just think that I think I'll put it this way. I think they finally peaked, which is, that it took them 25 years to peak. Well, is pretty remarkable as it is. But I think Saratoga, based on these numbers, and I could be proven wrong next year when they handle 900 million. But I just think the meat has come to a peak, has peaked.
At some point, I mean, it can't keep going up, 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 up forever, right? At some point, you're going to reach a peak. Maybe it impacts, when you get that many people at the track, maybe it impacts the fan experience. I don't know. But it's still, it's still the crown jewel of American horse racing, as you pointed out. It's still a fabulous racing season. Hopefully, it'll get back on track next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think many tracks would be glad to peak at 800 million
in
handle for the meet. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. It was still a good meet as far as handle, as far as the Travers Day handle being down. The breakdowns there were two breakdowns earlier on in the card, and a lot of people were just like, yeah, I'm done. That would be more so the on-track handle than the off-track handle. But weather was a major contributing factor, because not only were the races taken off the turf, the ones that weren't, you didn't know what shape the turf course was in. It was a softer turf course. So, I like to dabble a little bit and have a few wagers. There were some races I just wasn't betting on because it was on an off track. It was on a good track. The turf was soft. I don't know who's going to like it. And I think this overflows into a lot of the bigger gamblers as well, perhaps avoiding those softer turf days because it could be a grab bag. You don't know who's going to handle it. You don't know who's not going to handle it. So weather was the number one contributing factor for, I believe, every single thing that went on at Saratoga. Next year, they're likely to have perhaps a longer meet. I mean, there's talk of the Belmont Stakes being held there. We don't know when they're going to be held, but I don't think it's peaked. Next year may be the best meet of all if the weather stays good, especially if they're going to have the Belmont Stakes there. We don't know. It was a travesty that it was generally a horrible meet by the larger part of things, but there were some good things to come out of it as well. But weather was the number one attributing factor for sure.
Let me throw something else in there, Bill. I'm not suggesting that this is a major contributing factor, but I personally know some big bettors who dialed back their action on Saratoga out of frustration with the stewards and stewards' decisions and not stewards' decisions. Just this past week, we had Javier Castellano on a horse who veered in at the start. It wasn't Javier's fault. Veered in badly at the start, caused a rider breaking from post one to be unseated. The horse went on to win the race. They didn't even put up the inquiry sign. I got like 4 text messages right away. You got to see this head on. Not only did they not disqualify the horse, they didn't even put up the inquiry sign. So, that's also something that I think needs to be addressed in the future at NYRA.
A good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So Zoe touched on some of the things that we may be looking forward to for Saratoga in the future. And we were told a while back that the 2025 Belmont Stakes would likely be run at Saratoga. Now they're talking about the 2024 Belmont Stakes as well. We don't know quite how that would all work. I would guess that they would start at Aqueduct. It looks like the Belmont, to me, from reading between the lines, I don't think we're going to see racing at Belmont Park until 2026. If that's the timeline for when they think the new grandstand will be built. So I would imagine they would start out at Aqueduct, run, May, June, et cetera, or April, May, and then maybe around Preakness time or something like that, or maybe a little bit later. I don't think they're going to take the entire Belmont spring meet, transfer it to Saratoga, then add Saratoga onto it. But having said that, it's going to be really cool to see the Belmont Stakes run at Saratoga. And they also came out, and I'm glad they said this because it took care of any ambiguity. The race will be run at 1.25 miles. You can't run a 1.5 mile race at Saratoga with the configuration of that racetrack. So, Randy, you looking forward to the 2024 Belmont Stakes at Saratoga at 1.125 miles? Traditionalists won't like that, will they?
Yeah, what happened to all this tradition? You can't change the Triple Crown.
Right.
What is this? A run of Belmont at 1.25 miles? Come on, guys. There is a way to run it at 1.5 miles.
I'm sorry, I said 1.125 miles. I meant 1.25 miles, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
you said 1.25 miles.
Today, okay.
Yeah, there is a way to run it at 1.5 miles. You just make the 16th pole an alternate finish line like they do at Keeneland and Oaklawn and the fairgrounds. You'd have an 815-foot stretch. You'd have a short stretch, but then you'd be starting the race at the 4.5 pole, and then you could back up the run up even a little bit further from there. So there is a way to keep it at 1.5 miles if they really wanted to. And then the date, they have come out and said, I believe June 8th is what. So Belmont or NYRA continues to stick its feet in the ground about moving the Belmont Stakes, even as First Racing is talking about moving the Preakness. So we'll see what happens there.
It's going to be very, very interesting to see, because nothing's written in stone with First and nothing's written in stone with NYRA, other than they've said they're not moving, but things can change. We'll have to wait and see.
And a subject we've talked a lot about, of course, over recent podcasts is synthetic surfaces. They are also now talking about putting in a synthetic track at Saratoga. Now, it would not replace the main track. It would be like that what they have at Gulfstream and what is coming to Belmont. It would be still another option used primarily when the races come off the turf. And boy, could they have used that this year, because those 11-horse turf races get washed off the turf and you wind up with 3-horse fields. If they get washed off the turf and then go to synthetic, you usually get 9 or 10. So I like that. I like that NYRA is being bold about its future, thinking about things, and not just sitting back and resting on its laurels. Moving the Belmont Stakes to Saratoga, putting in a synthetic track potentially at Saratoga. Just think how much handle they would have saved this year if they had a synthetic track. Those handle numbers, they wouldn't have been down 9%, that's for sure.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Keeneland. It was quite a weekend for Keeneland September alumni, with a lot of graduates showing they had a bright future, including, pun intended, Bright Future, the winner of the Jockey Club Gold Cup Saturday at Saratoga. Bright Future was a $350,000 2020 Keeneland September graduate. On the West Coast, Arabian Night, who was a 2021 $250,000 September grad, got home first in the Grade 1 Pacific Classic. And Keeneland had not one, but 2 TDN Rising Stars this past week. Locked took home a Saratoga maiden race on Friday. He was a $425,000 September grad. And Agat Road earned the honors on Saturday. He was a $650,000 September purchase. This year's September sale kicks off Monday and runs through September the 23rd. Learn more at theworldyearlingsale.com. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
If this place could talk, it would roar. It would say, "This is racing." This beating heart in the heart of horse country. Steady and strong beneath the roar, reminding us why. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Stone Street. Stone Street will offer 59 homebreds at the upcoming Keeneland September sale, taking place from September the 11th through the 23rd, including hip number 100, a colt by Tappet out of the multiple Grade 1 Stakes winner Dream Rush. This colt is a half-brother to Grade 1 Stakes winner Dreaming of Julia, who produced champion 3-year-old filly Malathat, as well as Julia Shining. Just look at him, he's a hunk. He is selling with Denali Stud, and you can see him in person at Keeneland Sales Grounds in barn number 5 at Denali. Stone Street's Book One offerings alone include Colts and Fillies by top sires Tap It, Good Magic, Uncle Mo, Into Mischief, and Curlin. Stone Street, born to run, raised to win.
So we've talked about some of the things that didn't go quite so well at Saratoga. Let's talk about the things that did. And I jotted down my highlights of the meet, and I'll go through them real quickly. And I would imagine that Zoe and Randy would probably agree with most of these. First of all, Arcangelo winning the Travers. Tremendous performance in that race. It was a race where we wanted to find out who was the best 3-year-old male on the dirt. We not only found out, we found out with the definitive performance where Arcangelo proved without a shadow of a doubt he's number one. Jenna Antonucci's story has been a great story throughout the year. She did it again. Echo Zulu winning 2 big races, the Honorable Miss and the Ballerina, getting 112 buyer figures, and each one ties Cody's wish for the best figure of any horse to run in the U.S. This year. And how about Linda Rice? She won the first race of the meet, the last race of the meet. With 20 races to go, she trailed Chad Brown by 5 wins, and she caught him in the very last race. This was the 5th consecutive title she either won or finished in a tie for first place at NYRA, starting with the 2022 Aquatic Fall meet. What she's been doing over the last year and a half is absolutely remarkable. But my number one highlight of the meet, Casa Creed. 7 years old, 2 stakes wins, including the 4-star Dave, wins the Kelso. Lee Einsteiler, who we had on as a Green Group Guest of the Week a couple weeks ago, easy guy to root for. I just think that 7-year-old, cool old horse winning that Grade 1, that's my vote for the highlight of the meet. You guys?
You don't even need me and Zoe. You got all the highlights laid out there perfectly, Bill. You'd have to talk about doing your homework. It would be the Travers for me, I think, and Jenna Antonucci, again, winning following the Belmont Stakes, obviously with Arcangelo. But all of those, Echo Zulu, she would be my vote for horse of the meet if I actually had a vote.
Yeah, for me too, Arcangelo. Great to see Katie Petruniak's piece last week on taking the canoe into the infield there at Saratoga into the lake. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually sit in that canoe, but the pictures of Jenna and Robert, the exercise rider, in the canoe paddling it, just perfect. And horse racing needs someone like Jenna right now. On Travers Day, she saved the day. She's a good spokesman for the sport. She's very good on social media. She's doing her work with the DRF as well, but she's been engaging with the fans, like wandering around and interviewing random fans. Everything she's doing is what the sport needs more of right now. So I do applaud her. Delighted to see Linda Rice tie the trainer's title. I know Chad Brown must have been spitting bricks. He won the opening race on the last day of the meet and had 10 other chances, 6 seconds, and Linda Rice just snags it in the very last race and they tie for the title. And Linda was quoted after she won her first race of the meet. Can you be the leading trainer? Unlikely. When she was leading trainer back in 2009, I believe she won 20 races. She said she would have been glad to win 20 races. She won 35 and tied with Chad Brown. So kudos for her. Her win percentage was higher than Chad Brown's. Chad Brown, you got to feel for him a little bit. 65 races taken off the turf. That is the bulk of his stable right there. So for him just to tie in first place with a plethora of turf runners speaks volumes for his stable and how far it has come with their dirt runners. He can no longer be pegged as purely just a turf trainer. But kudos to Linda Rice and her team, Jose Ortiz, everyone working very, very hard to get that done. I think her final total was 147 starts, 35 wins. Chad was 183 to 35.
And Chad's primary owner, Seth Klarman, had another fantastic meet at Saratoga. You go back and look at the last 10 years, I think, or thereabouts, he's topped the owner standings at Saratoga. Saratoga is also always about top 2-year-olds. And Klarman had arguably, I thought, the 2 most impressive of the 2-year-olds to run. He had the filly Ways and Means, who was an unlucky loser in the Spinaway last weekend. And on Saturday, he had a horse break his maiden by the name of General Partner. The 92 Beyer speed figure, I thought visually was extremely impressive. And I think you'll probably hear some noise about General Partner when it comes time for the Champagne at Belmont.
And Irad Ortiz, love him or hate him, he's dominating once more. What was he? 65 to Jose's 25. That's a big spread.
I guess it'll be the Champagne at Aqueduct, Bill, right?
Yes, it will be. Yes. Or back, Belmont at Aqueduct. Remember, they branded it differently. So we go out with the Jockey Club Gold Cup, as you guys mentioned. I'm not going to knock Bright Future, but it is a guy who's been following New York racing since the 70s and somewhat of a historian. It pains me to see a race of the magnitude of the Jockey Club Gold Cup turn into just another race. You didn't have any of the big stars in there. Good luck to Bright Future. He did look good, but the only other time he even tried graded stakes opponents, he ran in the Brooklyn and he got beat about 4 football fields. So I don't know how good he is. The Spinaway, as you mentioned, Randy, a big effort from Ways and Means, but I was just generally disappointed to see her get beat, even though she got beat by a good horse in Bright Work. Because I was like you. After that maiden race, I thought, wow, the sky's the limit for this horse. I mean, if you could find a future book for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, I'm getting down.
Have you seen the head on yet?
I understand all that. Yeah, she ran great, but I was just disappointed that she didn't win. Now, and how about the hopeful? And a shout out, Gary Contessa has won 2 races all year. 2 races in all year. They just happen to be the Schuylerville and now the Hopeful with Nutella Fella, a $12,000 Keeneland September purchase they bought privately after the horse broke its maiden at Delaware Park, and the first ever Grade 1 winner for the sire Run Happy. So I'm sure Mattress Mac was doing somersaults. Randy, you have this great knowledge of history and you go down the rabbit hole. I'm going to ask you this question. Who was the last hopeful winner to win the Kentucky Derby? Can I actually stump him, Zoe? What do you think?
Oh, you totally stumped me. Carry up on the hopeful, but I know there have been a lot more since then. All right, go ahead.
Well, it just goes to show you how hopeful winners have not fared well coming into their 3-year-old year. Affirmed in 1977.
Wow.
The hopeful winner, and of course, the Triple Crown winner of 1978. Now, Fleet Alex did win the hopeful, then came back to win some Triple Crown races, but the last Kentucky Derby winner, you have to go back to Affirmed in 1977. Zoe, I stumped him. Can you believe it?
That's amazing.
Did Secretariat even run in the hopeful? I think
yes, he did. He did. He won. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, anyways.
Did you happen to see the clip of Mattress Mac eating the Nutella? There's a clip of him
that's right.
on Twitter. It looks like he hates it. I mean, how can you not like Nutella? But he was trying to eat the Nutella and praise Nutella Fella for winning, and it just looked like it was excruciating for him to eat the Nutella for Run Happy's first Grade 1 winner. So yeah, well done to Gary Contessa. I think Ways and Means will face off again with Bright Work in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, but you should take a good look at that head on. She clipped heels and then tried to run off down the backside.
Right. And I imagine they'll meet in the Frazette in between as well before they head to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies.
So more on the Jockey Club Gold Cup, just a bit. I mean, it was a Grade 3 level stakes, and I don't know what Naira can do about it, given the Whitney earlier in the meet and given its position on the calendar on Labor Day weekend. Hopefully this is kind of a one-off and it'll rebound again next year. But what's interesting to me about Bright Future, I think a Proxy's probably a better Breeders' Cup Classic type horse at 1.25 miles. Bright Future got away with 3/4 and 114.10, and Proxy was really getting to him at the end of the race. But Bright Future is a son of Curlin. He's owned by Mike Rapoli and Vinnie Viola. 2019, they won the Jockey Club 1, finished first in the Jockey Club Gold Cup by a nose. Again, Rapoli, Viola, Todd Pletcher, with a horse named Vino Rosso, who, like Bright Future, is a son of Curlin. Now, in that particular instance, in 2019, if you recall, he was disqualified. Yes, the stewards will actually disqualify Irad Ortiz in a Grade 1 stakes race. They did it with Vino Rosso. back then. And he went on, bright future in his very next start, to go to Santa Anita and win the Breeders' Cup Classic. That's exactly the pattern that Rapoli and Vinny Viola are hoping for with this son of Curlin. But he's much less accomplished, I think, than Vino Rosso was at this stage of his career. So he's got a lot more work to do, I think, than Vino Rosso did. TDN Writers Room also brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. A couple of anniversaries to note. First of all, the PHBA is celebrating 75 years since its founding. Over the past 10 years, the PHBA Breeding Fund has distributed an average of $28.5 million each year in awards, in owner bonuses, in restricted race purses, and breeder and stallion awards. The other anniversary, congratulations to PHBA Executive Director Brian Sanfratello, celebrating a 50-year wedding anniversary. Way to go, Brian. Reminder, the next two races in the PA Sire PA Bred Stallion Series, September 23rd, each at 6.5 furlongs, each with a purse of $150,000. To learn more about that and about owning and breeding in Pennsylvania in general, you can go to PA Breeder. It's an email address, not a website. Email pabreeder@gmail.com.
The PA Horse Breeders Association presents the Pennsylvania Stallion Series. 6 races for PA Sire, PA Bred 2-year-olds at Parks. 2 $100,000 contests at 5.5 furlongs. On August 21st, PA Day at the races. September 23rd, PA Derby Day has 2 races at 6.5 furlongs, both with a $150,000 purse. And in December, 2 races going long, each worth $200,000. For more, go to pabred.com.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by the Fast Sires at WinStar Farm. This week we're going to talk about Outwork, the third leading 4th crop sire by Grade 1 winners behind only Not This Time and Nyquist. Just this week he got a Grade 1 winner with Bright Work. We talked about winning the Spinaway Stakes. She's now 4 for 4 lifetime. And it's the second straight year that Outwork has sired the winner of the Spinaway. Last year, Leave No Trace, also a daughter of Outwork. And why not? Outwork had precocious 2-year-old form himself. He broke his maiden in April at Keeneland in one of those 4.5 furlong baby races. And of course, also won a Grade 1 in New York, the Wood Memorial, as a 3-year-old. Outwork standing stud at WinStar Farm. This week's fastest horses of the week. Yes, 2 of them. Obviously, Bright Future winning the Jockey Club Gold Cup with that 103 buyer speed figure, but also getting a 103 buyer. Same day, West Coast, Del Mar, the Green Flash Handicap went to Motorious, owned by Anthony Fantacola, trained by Phil D'Amato, who had 3 horses in the race. He finished 1st, 3rd, and 4th in the Green Flash. Motorious, in his last 6 starts, has had 4 wins in 2 seconds. That was a 5 furlong turf race at Del Mar. So he obviously becomes one of the leading West Coast candidates for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint at Santa Anita. 2 fastest horses of the week, Bright Future and Motorious. The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by the Green Group, a tax accounting, consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. For more information about how the Green Group can save you some hard-earned cash, go to www.greenco.com.
And we welcome in now the Green Group guest of the week, and it's none other than Ted Nicholson, Vice President of Racing at Kentucky Downs. The meet started last week, continues through this weekend. And Ted, it's such a great story every year because Kentucky Downs just gets bigger and better and richer, better horses, bigger fields, more money being bet. This year you have 11 stakes races worth $1 million or more. The purses are astronomical, $150,000 maiden special weight races. But take me through the economics of Kentucky Downs. I mean, obviously this revenue is coming from the historical horse racing machines. What's happening that every year you're able to put more and more money into the program?
Well, it's a great question, Bill, and thanks for having me. So the HHR machines obviously generate the lion's share of the business. But they also, with the added element of us having satellite locations. So we have a satellite location in Bowling Green that is also generating HHR revenues. So that also helps us on the purse side. But that also, that revenue or that purse structure money also goes to Keeneland and to Ellis. We send that money through the KTDF and the HBPA every year.
Yeah, Ted, I think that's something, it doesn't fly under the radar so much in the industry, but I think racing fans don't really realize the extent to which Kentucky Downs casino revenues, HHR revenues, support the other purse structures of racetracks in Kentucky. Talk about that a little bit and how that got started and to what level you're contributing to the purse structure around the state.
Randy, that's also a good question. It all started back probably before I got here, and I got here in 2015. It was a joint effort between the KTDF, the previous owner, Corey Johnson, and the HBPA. And we saw in 2014 starting to elevate we only ran 5 days. And I think Corey felt like we really needed to prop up Ellis Park because there was such a large gap between Ellis and the others. And so before I got here, they had discussed trying to get them as much excess, any surplus that Kentucky Downs was going to have at the end of each year. We would earmark that money towards purse structure at Ellis to get them to a little bit higher level. And that started off, I believe the first year they did that was 14, and that was right before I got here. And that was about $300,000 that was sent to Ellis. This year, we sent Ellis 4.5. And that's that 4.5 million is a combination of KTDF and the HBPA association money. And we've seen in those, 9 years, 9 years, that, it just didn't, go from A to B. It was a stair step elevation every year of being able to get monies to Ellis and recently to Keeneland. And the Keeneland piece was to try and help Keeneland get into, especially in the spring, to compete with Oaklawn, because Oaklawn's purses had elevated to a point where a lot of trainers were saying, should I race this maiden at Oaklawn, or should I, or not just maiden, but any horse at Oaklawn, or should I wait for Keeneland like I normally would? And so that we wanted to alleviate that question in their mind. And then with Ellis, we saw a lot of local Louisville, Lexington trainers who normally probably would have taken a shot sending horses up to Saratoga, but decided, the pots aren't that bad at Ellis. So, why not run there? And they've always had a very safe surface at Ellis. So that was kind of a combination too. If you had a baby, you'd probably rather try and run them at Ellis than you would sending them to run against the millionaires at Saratoga.
Just want a quick follow. So is this all benevolence, or do you see it tangibly helping Kentucky Downs?
It's really a benevolent thing that was started. There's obviously for the whole Commonwealth of Kentucky, it's important. And that's why this was started. We want to make sure that when owners and trainers are sitting there in Lexington at the sales, they're making a decision based on not just our meet or Keeneland's meet. They're making it based on the whole region, because you really want your horses to stay localized. And what we've seen, I think, over the course of the last, at least for me, the last 4 or 5 years, is we're getting a lot more owners that want to race here because they have a Kentucky bred, and it makes way more sense for them to run in Kentucky than they would in California. The cost of living in California has gotten out of control. Every expense is more than double what it is, in Kentucky. So it makes more sense. You're running for twice as much money, but your expenses are half. Any businessman would do that math.
So essentially, you are boosting a year-round Kentucky circuit, and it's going to benefit Kentucky Downs as well. 2017 total handled 30 million. Last year, a whopping $80 million, which leads me to your next question. You put in some improvements there. I was last at Kentucky Downs 21 years ago. Where are you right now? Are you in the brand new hotel?
I actually am in one of the suites in the hotel that sits at the 8th pole. So, yeah, we've done a lot. Every year we try to pick off something or some things that we can do to improve the facility, for whether it's for horsemen or whether it's a guest experience. This year it's kind of a combination. The guest experience is the hotel. You all weren't here last year. But we had like a big, ugly blue fence that surrounded the hotel because it was under construction. That's all gone. Everything looks wonderful. Actually, on Sunday, we're going to have a pool party that sits, again, right at the 8th pole. So you could be hanging by the pool and then go make a bet, go watch the race at the rail, all within 100 feet of each other. And so, yeah, we try to do everything that for all and not just zero in on one thing. And this year, on the horseman side, we built a horseman's viewing deck, which we've never had before. I used to see a lot of horsemen try to sneak up to the media tower so that they could kind of get a better view of their horses coming down the stretch. So in lieu of that, what we decided was, just as a horseman come out of the paddock, instead of them walking out to the apron, we built a viewing deck right there. It's right at the wire. It's a perfect location. And so far in the first 3 days, it's been extremely well received. The other, I think some people might think is a minor improvement, but it really, I think, is a big improvement. And I got probably just as many wows from it than I did the horseman viewing area. Is we did a lot of asphalting in space that was mostly gravel in years past. And as a horse person, you can fully understand, if you are in one of those barns that's right near the gravel, that dust comes up and you don't want your horses breathing that. So we've really made a concerted effort to asphalt as much as we possibly can, in not only in the backstretch, but also that roadway that leads from the backstretch to the jocks' quarters.
Ted, I know this question comes up every year, but I'll ask it again. You have so much money to allocate towards purses. You get such big fields. You get a very robust handle. Is there any room, if it's this good now, why wouldn't you add? I'm not saying going to a 30-day meet, but why wouldn't you add a couple days to the meet?
The only answer that I could give you, Bill, that's on my mind would be safety. And that's obviously on everybody's mind these days, is safety. And so if I added a day, it would have to be a day where it would be almost like a spare day, because the reality is when you run 75 races over a turf course, and we have 3 lanes, don't get me wrong, but if you're running on 3 lanes, 75, you're running 25 on average races on each lane. That's a lot of pounding. I mean, I've got the best turf guy in the business with Butch Lear, who used to be at Churchill for 45 years, but even Butch would shake his head and go, I wouldn't do it. So to answer your question, I think we're going to be at 7 for a little while until I can figure out how I can add a 4th lane.
You got the same turf usage problems as Ascot and Goodwood and places like that now. So Kentucky Downs always had one of the lowest takeout rates, the lowest probably, of any racetrack in America. 14% win, place, and show, for example. This year, you made the decision to boost takeout 1% across the board, in spite of how much success you've had in the wagering product over the last few years. What led to that decision?
Well, I can tell you straight out, Randy, it wasn't easy. It wasn't made in a vacuum. The decision was really a tough one. It was made back in February. I think Jenny put out a press release back in early March that we were going to do it. And the reason behind it was I had to find a way to find some revenue. It's great to have great big purses. Like you said, $80 million in handle last year. But when you're running only for 2 weeks and you have an inordinate amount of expenses to put up a temporary show, it's not like, I was at Arlington. We just flicked on the lights and spruced up the grounds and made Mr. D happy, and away we go. Well, you can't do that here. We don't have a grandstand. So I have a lot of tents. I have a lot of temporary expenses. I have to ship in stuff. Our TV crew's temporary. Our basically everybody's temporary. And so I have 60 people that live here temporarily, which means I put them up in hotels to pull off this show for 2 weeks or 3. They're here typically for 3 weeks. So I have a lot of expenses. They're all going up. Even the people that you see in between the races, those folks that are on the turf and they're tamping down those divots, those folks used to work for $10 an hour. Now it's 25. So you can see where my expenses have gone. Now, on top of that, you fold into getting a bill from HISA for $650,000 for a 7-day race meet. And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize, that you're having to swallow something that before I was paying the state of Kentucky $48,000 for the same exact work that's being done. Like the processes that the state of Kentucky does or has been doing, it really didn't change much, because I think HISA utilized what Kentucky's policies and procedures were, and they said, yeah, you guys do it right. Let's invite the rest of us, the rest of the racetracks in Kentucky and some of the bigger tracks around the country have had to take the brunt of the expenses. So when you fold in the inordinate amount of expenses that have been skyrocketing and the HISA bill, I felt like had to go a little higher. Now, you said that we used to have the lowest purse structure or the takeouts in the United States. We still do. We're when you take the blend of bets, and that's why I did it. I was, there were some, that would probably say, hey, well, why didn't you go higher? Well, I didn't want to go higher. I wanted to keep the horse players happy. And I wanted to be able to be 1% under, at least 1% under the bigger tracks. So Keeneland is 19.2. We're at 18.2. Churchill is 19.9. California is 20.2. I think New York is like 20. So we're still far below what everybody else that's at our racing levels, when you have purses like this and the jockeys and the trainers and the product, we're still far below everybody else.
But you're still making an awful lot of money. I think I read that Kentucky Downs, I don't know how many million, but it's a lot of million that you are netting in commission, which may lead some people to say, why aren't you building a grandstand? You have all of this money that you're making off of the revenue and it comes in. Are you still trying to go for the country fair kind of vibe there? Is that what you're going for? Because people might roll up there and be like, whoa, all this money, why do we have a grandstand? Why isn't there a suite? Why isn't there this? And I love Kentucky Downs.
I know what you're saying. And so I can't tell you, Zoe, how many times people have said to me, I love this atmosphere, so don't ever change it. Well, the putting a grandstand up, I think would change the genuine feel of what Kentucky Downs is really all about. I think people love the ability to just, pull up and tailgate at the top of the stretch, or pull out their I call them soccer mom chairs, and whatever. They're those unfoldable, quick pop it down chairs. They're all over the place mid stretch, and you're bringing a cooler and you're having fun and you're watching the races, and so that's the essence of what this place is. That plus the fact that, you stand there and you look and you're saying to yourself, wow, from the mile pole to the 3/4, that is dramatically elevated. And you don't see it that much on television. And then when Larry says they're going down the hill, you really don't see it as much as you do when you're actually here. I know, Bill, you were here a couple of years ago, and so you know what I'm talking about. So when they get to that 3/4 pole, there is a dramatic drop, and they go down a hill and around a turn. And as they actually, Zoe, you probably rode here. When you get to the top of the lane, now you're starting to go back up a hill a little bit. So all of those things you would never want to change. I don't think I'd really want to change the fact that we, putting up a grandstand. Now, will we start to do other things to improve the experience? Yeah, like I said before, we want to do that every year to improve it, but not lose the real true essence of what this place is all about.
And that's fair enough. The stretch is 3/8 of a mile long. It's pretty much the longest stretch in North America. There could be room for both, but we'll move on from that. It's a terrific place to be. And I think I just missed Leading Rider by one there many moons ago. And I can attest that it really is one of the most unique racetrack, not only surfaces, but just the configuration of the downhill, uphill, and being the probably most arduous stretch in North America. If you're on the lead at the head of the lane, you have an awful long way to go.
and you referenced television. Thank you, by the way, for improving the TV camera coverage of Kentucky Downs this year. It is noticeable.
Well, I will tell you, all that TV credit goes to somebody I worked with years ago at Churchill. His name is David Loynden, and he is an old pro at not only TV, but also horse racing TV. And he's always coming up with different ideas. The good thing that we were able to do on the TV this year was we were able to put a permanent camera on top of one of the hotel it's actually the event center that sits between the hotel and the gaming facility, but it's a permanent location. You get a really good view of the horses as they leave the gate and go down to that 3/4 pole. David was the one who came up with the idea of putting a camera in our cornfields that you could shoot as the horses are going around the turn. Unfortunately, we only run 7 days. So the TV guys are just now starting to get the hang of switching and making sure that you can see those horses as they're right in front of you as they go past the half-mile pole. But all in all, I think we just are always trying to figure out a better way for our guests to, the horse player that's sitting in Des Moines, Iowa, to the guy who's on his computer and supposed to be working or doing his homework. So you can know where your horse is. There's nothing worse than watching a race, having a bet on a race, and not knowing where your horse is.
Has it surprised you that more Europeans have not made the trek over? We saw ancient Rome just dominate. Have you been out there sourcing and treading down, knocking down Aidan O'Brien's door and being like, hey, look, this is what we've got. Where are you? They seem to have thought the Arlington Million disappeared. Why don't you come to Kentucky Downs?
We have made a concerted effort to try and get horses from Europe to come. I think with the horse Ancient Rome winning the other day, I think that will bode well for us down in the future. We had a foreign horse won last year as well, but it'll come. I think it takes a little while for word to spread across the pond, but we're going to be being a heck of a lot more active in trying to get that spot of our business to improve. But it was nice to see. I was actually this is almost embarrassing to say, but I actually was the one who made sure that that barn was disinfected for the USDA. So Ancient Rome owes me a little bit of time and money because I made sure that was okay for that. The USDA came in and we had to spray a specific disinfectant and make sure that whole barn, and it's the old vet barn, if you remember, it's the old vet barn that only had 8 stalls. So we had 2 foreign horses in those 8 stalls. But anyway, yeah, we got lucky and he ran big.
Ted, can I just add, now that we're on that subject, I just want to add something to it. Horses that are not Kentucky breds don't run for the same money as the Kentucky breds. Most European shippers obviously would not be Kentucky breds. Ancient Rome was a Kentucky bred. So didn't that certainly play into the plans of the stable to come in and race for he's racing for the full tilt for the $2 million purse.
Yeah. So, that's part of the thought process. But if almost to Zoe's point, if you're sitting there I went to Epsom Downs with my son in April, and if I was a trainer of a horse there, because that configuration is somewhat similar to what we have, I would, even if it's, for example, if the race is $1 million, and we had a lot of them, if you're running for 600,000 instead of $1 million, but find me a race in Europe that's not on ARC Day, that's not $1 million, that's not a $600,000 purse. So if you have a foreign bred horse and you're thinking, even remotely thinking Breeders' Cup at all, it makes way too much sense for you to bring your horse here, run here, win here, and then you're going to go and run well in the Breeders' Cup. So it doesn't have to be the purse only being X comparative to Y because you're a Kentucky bred. It shouldn't play into anybody's thought process. I would think that you should be looking at it and say, wow, we're running for 600,000. That's pretty strong.
Can you foresee having a grade 1 race there? Is that coming soon?
So Zoe, can you make sure that happens? Because I was asked by somebody else in the media, so what is your dream of going forward? What should happen? What do you want to happen? And I said, I really want to make sure we get a grade 1. That's what I want. So we've done everything we possibly can. I've had numerous conversations with Bill and Dave Johnson on their show. And it's every year we do whatever we can. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is the year that we get over the top in one of our many races that our 2s get elevated to 1. I guess we'll find out.
Zoe will get the credit.
Yeah. Zoe, come January, we can have a celebration, somewhere warm, hopefully.
I'll be looking for the check in the mail. Good. I'll meet you there.
All right.
Very good. Well, Ted Nicholson, congratulations on all the success Kentucky Downs has had so far. And we'll see if you can top that $80 million handle record was set last year. I'm sure if you continue to have good weather, that's going to fall as well. Kentucky Downs, very special race meet. The motto they use, or the slogan they use on our radio show is there's unique and then there's Kentucky Downs. I think that speaks very well about how special that track is, especially for the horse players, the horsemen, for everybody in the game. Ted, thanks so much, and have a good run for the final week at Kentucky Downs.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good luck to everybody watching on Betting the Races.
As the Green Group Guest of the Week, Ted Nicholson will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation from Lynn Green and Company at the Green Group. If you want to find out more, just go again to www.greenco.com.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonder Wheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the Thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
Do you know where Kentucky breds are winning? I'll tell you, all over the world. This week alone, Kentucky breds won 2 group races and had a new TDN rising star in England and Ireland. Opera Singer, a 2-year-old filly by Justify, won the Grade 3 New Tanana Stud Irish EBF Stakes at the Curragh in Ireland to stamp herself as one of the leading 2-year-old fillies in Europe. Passenger won the Grade 3 Weatherby's Global Stallions Winter Hill Stakes, try saying that, it's a mouthful, at Royal Windsor in England. And then finally, 2-year-old Ebden Shaddad was named the newest TDN rising star in England, winning a race at Newmarket. That is 3 of 7 impressive Kentucky bred winners in Europe this past week alone. If you're shopping at Keeneland September, shop Kentucky breds. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them all over the world, literally.
Well, you've been spending a lot of time on Saratoga. Let's head out west and find out what's going on at Del Mar. Last weekend, of course, the Pacific Classic, and coming up is the final weekend of racing at Del Mar. We obviously want to talk about the Pacific Classic. Before we get into this, and Zoe, always good to have a jockey on when we talk about jockey issues. It's a new world with the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. And the Italian jockey Antonio Fresu, who was second in the standings at Del Mar, he was a naughty boy. He kept accumulating one crop infraction after another. Once again, you can only strike the horse 6 times. And then if you go over the 6, there's an escalating series of penalties. So you get more points if you strike the horse 8 versus 10 versus 12 or whatever. So lo and behold, when everything was compiled, they looked at all the points. They looked at the infractions. They looked at what, again, the point structure was. He was given a 32-day suspension for misuse of the whip or overuse of the whip. I talked to Alberto yesterday, and here's what he had to say. He says, I am new in this country, and where I rode before, you can use the crop more times. When I came here, I needed to change my style and keep count. Most of the times, I was just one over the limit. It's not so easy to keep count, especially when you are fighting for a win and are head-to-head with another horse. It's my own fault. The other jockeys adapted to these new rules. Last couple of weeks, it happened 3 times in 3 days, and I won every one of those races by a nose. It shouldn't have happened, but I don't think it's really fair. It's not like you're riding in a way where you get other people in trouble or in a bad spot. It's not doing something dangerous, so I think the penalty is a little harsh. Still, I want to change, and I want to improve. I want to do my best and not make mistakes like this anymore. This is pretty draconian, 32 days for this, but those are the rules. He understood the rules and he broke them, Zoe.
32 calendar days, so
right.
Not racing days. We have to make that, and he's going to appeal them. I'm not buying the fact that the whip rules are less stringent in Europe. Everybody knows that they are as stringent as they are here. They always have been. I mean, we've cracked down in recent years in North America, but in Europe, they've always been cracked down. So I'm not buying that story. Antonio is a smart guy, a very good rider, and he's doing what he feels he needs to win. So he's going to pay the cost. I don't know how he'll be able to appeal all 32 days. They are calendar days. We race 3 days a week at the moment in Southern California. So we'll have to see how that plays itself out. But you break the rules, you're going to pay. He knows the rules. It's going to have to count. It's as simple as that. They're the same rules for everybody else. You do it 3 times in 3 days and you win by a nose. Fortunately, the owners aren't having to forfeit the win. That is very good, but he's going to have to pay. Sorry, Antonio. He's a smart guy. It's not like he's some dumb jock. He's well-spoken, well-traveled, smart guy. I'm sure he can count to 6. He can obviously count to 7. Just got to learn to count to 6. That's all you got to do.
He was sufficiently humble and apologetic in what he said to Bill. You know, he said he thought it was a little draconian or whatever. What's he supposed to say? That, you know, they didn't give me enough? Of course he's going to say that, you know. But, you know, it sounds like he's going to try to turn over a new leaf. But again, like you said, Bill, I mean, the rules have been right there. They've been front and center. They haven't been hidden. This is not a judgment call, basically. Right. You know, and that you break the rules, you pay the penalty.
Yeah, and I, you know, people in this game, they love to appeal, but I don't see how he'd have any chance of winning an appeal. I mean, it's right there front and center. You show the race and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Uh-oh, you went over. Next race, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, what could they possibly, you know, have to say through an appeal? But he'll be having a vacation. As Zoe said, though, keep in mind that's calendar days, not racing days, and so that makes it a little bit less severe. Okay, so the Pacific Classic, to me, the story was the 3-year-olds, and for most of the year, I have been under the impression that this was a really weak group of older horses because everybody and their brother retired last year. I mean, last year's group of 3-year-olds and older horses in Flightline and whatsoever was extremely strong. Nobody came back. I mean, hardly anybody of consequence. So you would think the 3-year-olds this year might have the edge on the older horses. Normally, we don't get the answer to that until the Breeders' Cup Classic, but the Pacific Classic did provide an early answer, and it affirmed what I thought all along. The 3-year-olds are better. Arabian Night wins it for Bob Baffert. Go Rocket Ride, it was a close second, both of them coming out of the Haskell. I did not like Arabian Night. He ran a much better race than he ran in the Haskell. And I also didn't like the fact that John Velasquez, I don't know what the behind the scenes thing was, but he didn't come out to the Pacific Classic to ride him. He rode at Kentucky Downs instead, which I thought was a little bit odd. But Randy, I know you've been a big Arabian Night fan from going back day one. Your take on what I said about the 3-year-olds and you know how and both Go Rocket Ride and Arabian Night certainly look like they will be legitimate contenders in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
I guess so. Let's talk about this race first, then we'll talk about the 3-year-olds versus older horses in general. Yeah, you're right. I've been a big fan of Arabian Night. I absolutely loved him in this spot. In fact, thinking that they would take back Defunded, which they did since they're both out of the Baffert barn, and it looked to me like Arabian Night would control the pace, and I did not see any way that Go Rocket Ride could beat him. And going down the backstretch, I was patting myself on the back, and then at the quarter pole, I said, uh-oh. But then he comes fighting back on the inside and just manages to hold off Go Rocket Ride. Okay. The 3-year-olds clearly better, I think nationally, than the older horses as a group. But in this race, they finished the last quarter mile, Arabian Night and Go Rocket Ride, at about 26 2/5 seconds, going 1.25 miles of the classic distance. That's not very good. And as a matter of fact, it makes me think that neither of these horses are going to be able to handle Arcangelo if he maintains his form out west for the Breeders' Cup Classic. The only older horse out there, well, there are 2. One of them is going to surprise you. The main older horse out there, I think, that's waiting in the wings is White Barrio. If he can maintain the same form that he showed in the Whitney, okay, and Rick Dutrow will probably have him clicking on all cylinders. That's the only performance by an older horse figure-wise that I think is relevant to the Breeders' Cup Classic. But this is going to be a little bit out there for some people. The best horse to me in the Pacific Classic, okay, and he's going to be 40-1 if he manages to make it into the Breeders' Cup Classic field. Senor Buscador.
Ooh, wow.
Okay, this horse is ridden as if he's allergic to the rail. He was 3 or 4 wide on the first turn. He was 5 or 6 wide on the second turn. He was beaten 2 lengths. Plus, he was spotting both Arabian Night and Go Rocket Ride 6 pounds, 124 to 118. Won't be quite that much for the Breeders' Cup Classic. If this horse can just be ridden to save any ground whatsoever, and it's not the first time for Senor Buscador. I think you go back and look at his last race too. He's way out there in the middle of the track, and he still runs well. It was a very sneaky, under the radar performance by Senor Buscador. And if he gets a pace scenario, first, if he gets into the Breeders' Cup Classic field, and then he gets a pace scenario and saves any kind of ground, he might be a horse to throw in your exotics at Santa Anita at a huge price.
Perhaps he doesn't like the inside. Perhaps he is allergic to the inside. Some horses will only run on the outside. So, I mean, we'll see what Senor Buscador does. So, yeah, I could go with that. I love Go Rocket Ride, and I'm pretty sure that Arabian Night got a masterful piece of riding from Flavien Prat, getting the opening quarter in 23.35 on the lead. Now, he's ridden Go Rocket Ride. He knows that horse won't run inside behind horses. He knows that. So Flavien obviously was told, just go to the lead, keep going, slowed it down perfectly, opening quarter. Mike Smith finds himself down on the inside where that horse doesn't like it. He does not like running into dirt, but to his credit, he ran just well enough. He only really started to feel comfortable Go Rocket Ride was when he got outside of Flavien Prat coming down the lane, but then it was all over. Flavien knew he had enough left in the tank to keep his horse going, and I think that's what's made the difference, was Flavien getting that opening quarter, putting his horse on the lead and knowing, because he knows Go Rocket Ride better than anyone, that he doesn't like being down on the inside, and that's exactly where he was. It might be a different scenario in the Breeders' Cup Classic. They were both getting 6 pounds to the rest of the field, which, am I crazy? Is that not a lot this time of year? 6 pounds to older horses?
That sounds like a lot, yeah.
Seems like a lot. We're in August.
What is it in the Breeders' Cup Classic, Randy?
Three
or four. I think it's 26 and 22, I think is what it is.
Right.
It may be three, though. So you mentioned Senor Buscador, Zoe. May not like the rail. Let me share a pet peeve of mine as it pertains to jockeys. All right? And maybe you can shed some light on it. There's really no explanation for it.
Okay.
How many times do you see with a Senor Buscador type horse, okay, horse at the back of the pack, no other horses around?
Remind me who rode him.
Giovanni Franchi. All right, so you're at the back of the pack. Okay, you're riding a dead closer. Okay, you're last by 3 or 4 lengths. There's no other horse around you. Okay, first turn. You're in the four-path all the way around the first turn. Why? Do they not understand physics? Do they not understand geometry? It's not physics, it's geometry. I mean, why be out there losing ground in the 3 and 4 path when you're all by yourself? Why not tuck in on the rail, cut the corner all the way around the first turn, save all that ground, and then if you want to rally wide on the second turn, go for it.
I'm going to pose that question to Giovanni when I see him next week. That exact question. I will. I'll record it on my phone, and I'll bring it in and we'll play it. We'll find out.
He did have, in his defense, he had another horse inside of him for most of the first turn, right? But you see that all the time with riders who are by themselves at the back of the pack or no other horse around them in the middle of the pack. And instead of making an effort to come in a little bit and say, it's a length for every path you're off the rail that you're saving by coming in. And that seems to just like not register sometimes. Okay. That's my pet peeve of the day.
Del Mar meet will conclude with the 2 big 2-year-old races in the meet, the Del Mar Debutante and the Del Mar Futurity. Bob Baffert has 28 nominated Del Mar Futurity, which actually, believe it or not, I think is a little less than he normally does. But also I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but unlike Saratoga, Del Mar once again, great safety record. I believe there was only one, Zoe. I don't want to say something I don't want to be wrong about, but I know that the safety record at Del Mar again was very, very good, and congratulations to them for pulling that off again. So we will check in and see what happens with the 2-year-old races at Del Mar this weekend.
Baffert has won the Del Mar Futurity 16 times. He hasn't had nearly the same success in the Del Mar Debutante. He's only won that one 10 times. Can you imagine that?
Wow. Well, he'll have Prince of Monaco 2 for 2. Looks like he will be the overriding winner of that. And then on Saturday, the girls get to go. We'll see Tamara, the Beholder baby, who was so fabulous in her first start. Dreamfire, she's looking to be 2 for 2 at Del Mar. Several others in there, Chatless, and I can't even read my own writing here, but there'll be plenty in the fillies race there. So I'm going with Tamara.
Okay, now, because I stumbled around on those numbers from Del Mar, let me make sure I've got this right now. This is according to Mac McBride, who works for the Del Mar publicity office. He says, we have not lost a single horse from racing in the afternoon's dirt or turf, not a single horse during the race. Was also true last year, though we had two horses who had raced at the turf, went back to their barns and had heart attacks afterwards because they died within 72 hours of the race. They were counted out as turf breakdowns. So once again, 2 straight years at Del Mar, and knock on wood, that'll continue through the weekend. There has not been a single horse who died in the afternoon in a race. And as I say often about Santa Anita, the Southern California tracks have done a terrific job dealing with their own issues with horse safety.
Do want to remind you that the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV. This week's XBTV Work of the Week is the wire-to-wire Alabama winner, Randomized, who worked a sharp half mile on the Saratoga main track on Saturday in 49.33 for trainer Chad Brown. Randomized ran her record to 3 for 5 and winning the Alabama in her first graded stakes win back on August the 19th. Here's a nice bit of cross promotion for our sponsors. Look for the half brother to Randomized by Frosted, selling as hip number 1711 at the Keeneland September sale with Hidden Brook Farms. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. Joining a West Point partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie. And look at what happened with West Point this past weekend. If you watched the Flower Bowl at Saratoga on Saturday, 4-horse field, Parnack goes out, controls the pace, a glacial pace, and then outkick McCulloch down the stretch to score the upset win. Parnack is owned in part by West Point Thoroughbreds, giving West Point partners their 5th winner of the Saratoga meet. Also, they had a nice second in the Grade 3 with anticipation with Carson's Run. Both horses could be contenders for the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita. West Point now heads on to Keeneland September to look for more yearlings like Parnack and Carson's Run.
That's a wrap on this week's show. Where did all our dogs go? In the beginning, each one of us had dogs. We got Doodle back there. Where's Lucy?
Doodle's jet lagged.
Okay.
I think Lucy's napping upstairs. She's not underneath me. My wife has food up there. I think that's the issue.
Okay. All right. Anyways, well, we'll get our mascots back front and center next week. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in once again for this edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. I want to thank my partners, Randy Moss, Zoe Cadman. I want to thank our co-producers, Katie Petruniak and Anthony LaRocca, and our editors, Alita LaRocca and Nathan Wilkinson. Have a wonderful final weekend at Del Mar, and we'll be back at Belmont at Aqueduct in a couple weeks. Lots of good racing coming up this fall. Thanks for tuning us in. See you again soon next week.